Thanks for giving me an opportunity to be here amidst all of you. I'm Sanjeev Singhal, partner with SR Botley Boy and Central Council member, Institute of Chartered Accountant of India. I'm also the chair of the UNTAD ISR 39th and the 40th session. Nowadays, I deal with sustainability, but that topic was done in the morning. So let me talk about my core topic, which is navigating the complex compliances, and particularly in the light of constantly changing regulation. And probably, change is the way of life, but changing regulation, what it means for our friends who were just here, whether it is Neeraj from EY, who is a good friend, or Mandeep, who was one batch senior to me in the Shriram College, or from Microsoft. So, as CFOs, we deal with compliances. I've myself worked in industry for 15 years, 3 years with Hoshi Gashwala at Cyber Media. So compliances, is one area where, the burden of compliances has been increasing ever. And of course, now they've gone into very different directions. And of course, organizations have no choice but to keep up with these myriad of laws, rules and standards. And these vary across industries and jurisdictions. And non-compliance, what does non-compliance can lead to? It can lead to fines, probably the simplest, or the legal action, or the damage to reputation, and in some cases, the closure of the businesses, which is the worst for all stakeholders. The difficulties that the organization face, particularly, is evolving regulation. When we had Companies Act 1956, it was evolving for 5 decades, 6 decades. Now we have Companies Act 2013. It's been 10 years, but we say it's just the beginning of the act. And every day we see the changes. If you're a listed organization, again, you have to be on your toes for the regulation that the Ministry of Corporate Affairs requires or the Security Exchange Board requires. And we deal with all of them. Now let's talk about reporting. Now reporting used to be the simplest earlier, but now it's so complex. Either you will be covered by accounting standards or by Ind AS. If you're a global company, you may be reporting in certain jurisdiction on IFRS. When I was in industry at Jubilant Life Sciences, we used to report under 7 different accounting gaps across the world. Belgium gap, Canadian gap, US gap, Chinese gap, IFRS, so many gaps we used to report. And there's a gap between the various gaps. So what do? And they keep on changing. Data accuracy. Maintaining, of course, that is the given, that is basic, that whatever you report will be accurate. And if you think that was the easiest, let's wait for a few days or a few weeks. SEBI is coming up with digital assurance. From the institute, we have worked out on the format of this digital assurance. So now suppose somebody has reported that their revenue was X in their financial statement. Now your auditors will be required to give another certificate saying that whether it matches with the GST data, or whether your TDS data matches with 26AS, or whether your PF data matches with the EPF4 returns. How easy or that difficult is that, we never know, it will never, we all know that it will never reconcile. Because GST law will say something, certain things will be exempt, certain things will be out of the GST. So then a reconciliation is to be prepared. And what happens if the reported numbers and this reconciliation throws major discrepancies? Everybody will be in the job of explaining. So data accuracy is very, very important. Then we talk about internal controls. The world has seen Sarbanes-Oxley Act, and then came the ICFR in India. Well, people have settled with ICFR, internal control over financial reporting, and now ICSR is coming, internal control over sustainability reporting. Because with ESG, it's largely the non-financial data. But what kind of controls do you have on that non-financial data? So that is something which is in works, and maybe by the end of this year, we will see that internal control over sustainability reporting also being in place. And then the cross-border compliances, because many organizations are multinational corporations now, and as was being talked about generative AI, which is, a subject that I also like a lot. Now let's talk about the upcoming EU AI Act. It's massive. It talks about the rights of a natural human being. What kind of AI can be used on basically on the human beings? What is permissible without any permissions required? What can be done? What can be done with permission? What is that cannot be done without any permission? And the organizations will be required to follow that in the letter and spirit. Technology integration is happening, and of course, this is costly and complex. Some people may not classify it into the compliances, but without technology, you'll not be able to do anything. Without technology, probably we can't even beam this PowerPoint presentation. And during COVID, we have seen what role technology plays. Now, the challenges the organization faces, one is the resource constraint. I've been an economics student. We have always learned that there's a scarcity of resources. Whichever organization it is, whether it is Reliance, whether it is Vedanta, whether it is ITC or Adani, or you take Apple, or you take Microsoft or Google, everybody has resource constraints. Nobody has unlimited resources. And finance gets the least of the resources. Because people think that it's not adding to the top line. That's where the challenge is. So you have to show the worth in terms of if you're a CFO. And the regulatory scrutiny is at the highest. As a regulator of the accountancy profession, I see the level of regulatory scrutiny on the finance profession, on the auditors. There's a multiplicity of regulator. On one hand, we are there as Institute of Chartered Accountant of India. Then there is NFRA, National Financial Reporting Authority. Then there is Ministry of Corporate Affairs. Then there is Security Exchange Board of India. Then there is ED, there is SFIO, there is GST Department, there is Central Board of Direct Taxes, so on and so forth. And on one auditor and on one CFO, everybody comes together. Think of that regulatory scrutiny if you fail anywhere. Then there are whistleblower concerns. Now the whistleblower mechanism is mandatory in listed companies, and any complaint has to be dealt with properly, and it is to be reported by the auditors also in their CARO report. The Indian CARO report is the best example of enhanced reporting. There are 50 reporting requirements, apart from the audit report and apart from the internal control over financial reporting, apart from key audit matter. And these are 50 additional requirements, which are nowhere there in the world. So a lot of training and education requirement keep coming up. And then there are ethical challenges in training and education, because most of the training nowadays is online. So whether a person has just switched on the screen and the walls are taking the training, the cabins are taking the training, the human being is not there. And then the risk management. How do you mitigate your risk? That's become a very, very important function, be it a firm like ours or be it any organization in the world, or even a very small organization. Risk management is very, very important. The new requirements which are coming up for businesses, ESG reporting. I was just shortly talking to Hoshi. India has mandated ESG reporting, which we call as BRSR, Business Responsibility and Sustainability Reporting, for top 1,000 companies last year on a mandatory basis. And from this year, the audit reasonable assurance of that is also mandatory for 150 companies. Next year it will be 250, going up to 500, and then up to 1,000 by 26-27. And India is the first country in the world to mandate reasonable assurance. There are two types of assurance, limited and reasonable. Limited is that, where you say that nothing has come to our attention, that this is not true, this is not true. And a reasonable assurance is like a positive assurance. Last week, we had a meeting of ACGA, Asian Corporate Governance Association, which controls $30 trillion of investment in the world. They were here in Mumbai. So they're talking that why India is taking all these steps proactively when no other country in the world is doing it. I says, my India is changing. My India now leads by example rather than following others. We have held a very, very successful G20. We are talking of India, Europe and Middle East economic corridor. India is the leader. India will be the leader. And I always say that if there was ever a time to be in India, to be born in India, to be associated within India, the time is now. So we gave that message that don't think that when the world will adopt, India will follow. Now, India will lead by example and others will follow. And what is coming up is the value chain reporting now. Now, this is unique. And of course, some organization will face difficulty, particularly the large organization, because 75% of your value chain providers will also have to do ESG reporting and a limited assurance done. For a company like Reliance or Vedanta in India or ITC, that will cover thousands and thousands of organizations. We may feel that it's a burden, but as was mentioned in the first session also, what are we leaving for our for our future generation? We save for our children, right? All of us, at least in India, we save for our children. But when it comes to sustainability, we are borrowing from them. How? By 15th August, we consume annual resources. Means 4.5 month resources we are borrowing from next year, and we are borrowing from our next generation. This planet has existed for billions of years, and we all have destroyed it in less than 1 century. If that is the pace, then maybe next century, there will be nothing left on the planet. We don't have a planet B, and what are we doing to our planet? We feel that if we can buy, if we can afford, we should buy. No, that's not how it is. So value chain reporting is very, very essential. People may face hardships, but we have to adopt sustainable means of living life, as our Honorable Prime Minister says, lifestyle for environment. That is to be adopted in letter and in spirit. So what should, let me mention some more. Cybersecurity and data privacy. We have recently seen Personal Data Protection Bill has been enacted. Then the AML and counter-terrorism financing. We have seen how India is progressing on that also. And then the US FCPA and UK Bribery Act, because they have extra jurisdictional impact. Intellectual property rights, export control and trade sanctions are few more requirements that the businesses have to navigate. But is all that negative? Is all that gloomy? My answer is no. One has to adopt technology for ensuring that compliances are in place. There has to be a dashboard, and almost all CFOs have a dashboard in front of them. There are so many tools which are available now. But above all, what is required is the right resources. For compliances, you need to have the right set of people, and it is to be treated as an investment. And of course, whether it's chartered accountants or it is any other professional, in India, we have plenty of them available, and they're doing a remarkable job. One is to conduct risk assessment, regular risk assessment. One is to invest in training and education. External expertise may also be required sometime when you don't, because you cannot have an in-house expert all the time. And of course, regular audits and review, which will show where you stand. So what an organization should do? They should establish a compliance culture. The channel of communication have to be clear that it's a zero tolerance zone. No compromises with ethics, integrity, and independence. Proactive monitoring is required, and there has to be a documentation and record keeping. In the old days, there was a saying, "Pehle likh fir de, bhool pade to bahi se le." That's what all accountants do, that you have to write first and only then give. Similarly, in documentation is very, very essential in whatever you do. Although under the Indian Contract Act, an oral promise is also valid, but you still need to document it to ensure that it's passed on from one generation to another generation. And then if it ever we felt that we have reached the height, no improvement is required, probably that's the day when your organization will start falling down the lines. So the message is that there has to be a persistent compliance. Challenges will keep coming. There has to be strategic measures for effective compliance, and it's imperative that you have a proactive compliance management. And a lot of professionals in technology is available to help ease that job. But yes, finally, the responsibility will lie with the human beings. I don't see a situation in the near future when the machines will be penalized by courts. It is the human beings who will continue to be penalized by the courts, right? So even though in ZTV there could be a Rubia Liaquat and her AI reading the news, but when it comes to sentencing someone to guilty, it's always the human beings who will be held guilty. So let us imbibe on a culture of compliance in this great country, which is striving hard for moving into the next leap of growth. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.